job. Nice job.
So I wanted to start by saying thank you all for being here. It's crazy that we're here. This is nuts to me. I met TJ years ago at a veterans writing program session. And a couple of years later, he came back and said something about wanting to start this like backpack journalism thing and write about military. And I was like, oh, that's cute. And a few years later, he hired me for my dream job. And I'm so proud of him and so happy to be here and so happy to have you all here. So, and my team is just amazing. But also, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Crazy, crazy year for you. So yeah. I know it's a busy schedule. So I was talking last night with Leo Shane, who's here in the audience.
Naturally.
And after we got him to stop talking about the Phillies, we started talking about how weird this VA is. In the past, we'd ask questions and they never get answered, even for good news stories. And you have started monthly press conferences. Terrence and his team actually get back to us, even on the negative stories. Mm-hmm. You keep coming back, even when Orion goes after you for EHR. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because it's kind of why we're here.
Well, look, I'm thrilled that you're doing this. I'm thrilled to be chatting with you again. I think you know my admiration for you, which is just a small part of my admiration for the reporters, all the reporters who cover us. And I think the topic for today's session is exactly right, which is how we cover national security and how we cover war fighting and how we cover veterans is a national security issue. And that's how I enter this equation, not as a veteran, but as a national security professional. But the bottom line is I just believe that we at VA, we have basically 9 million enrollees in our healthcare, but there's 19 million vets in the country. So we start from a position that says there are veterans who could be enrolled with us who are not, so we want to reach them. And the reason to be transparent with you guys is to make sure that we can reach those vets. I admire what you do. I obviously have great respect for the First Amendment and all that stuff, and transparency is a good way to run an organization anyway. But at the end of the day, the outcome we're looking for is more veterans trusting VA and trusting VA enough to come in and enroll with us, come in and file a claim with us. Because at the end of the day, we want all 19 million working with us, one way or the other.
So that gets into my second question a bit. You're going out across the nation and trying to push out information about the PACT Act.
Yes.
The press corps is shrinking, and the military press corps is shrinking. And at first I was thinking that probably makes your job easier. But now I'm wondering if it makes it a little more difficult. And I was wondering if you could talk about how that's been trying to get the word out, but also how it compares to when you were chief of staff for Obama with the media then.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, well, let me say for a second how it's going. I think, we think that there are roughly a little over 6.2 million veterans who we believe qualify for the PACT Act. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of records issues in there and stuff, for example, so there's still a lot of Vietnam vets for whom we don't have great deployment records because of the fire at the National Personnel Record Center many years ago. So if that's what you're starting with, so let's take out those bad record numbers. So then we're at let's call it 5.3 million veterans we think qualify. Mm-hmm. To date, we've had about 450,000 veterans file a claim under the PACT Act. So you can see 450,000 and see a big number, or you can see a small number. I choose to see a small number, especially when we're working with a denominator of, north of 5 million. Veterans in our care can get what's called a toxic exposure screening, which is in effect a conversation with your primary care provider about what you've experienced in terms of exposure. And we've now given about 2.3 million toxic exposure screenings. I actually legit see that as a big number. Importantly, 40% of those veterans tell us about an exposure that we were not aware of, meaning these are veterans already in our care and we're learning something from them about what they're exposed to. And that allows us then to forward on that veteran to specialists or further review. So that gives you a sense of how it's going. The question then is, why is that 450,000 number? Why isn't it bigger? I think there's probably 3 reasons, and I think each of them points to the question you're asking. One is there's just a general lack of trust issue in VA. It's not everybody, and the trust numbers are getting better. And later this year, we're going to start for the first time applying the V signal. So that's our trust survey to the compensation benefit portfolio. So that'll be an important new data set. So one, we have to get over the trust issue. Second, there are a lot of vets who are unaware that this is out here. And so that's just going to be us having to get out there more aggressively in fora like this, but also just in individual conversations with veterans, which I know we all have, just even walking on the street or on a plane. These are all conversations I've had just in the last week alone. The third issue is there are veterans who are aware of it, but think they don't qualify or think they shouldn't qualify. And those are 2 different things. One, there's a reservist woman deployed into combat zones on 6 different deployments. She just assumed that as a reservist, she didn't qualify. Incidentally, women veterans are more likely to be in category 2 or 3 than other veterans, to think, to be unaware or to think that they don't qualify. Then we have a whole group of veterans, warriors, who say somebody else needs it more than I do. So they choose not to file. Well, here's what I can tell you about that. The way we prosecute these claims now using automation means when you file your claim, Kelly Kennedy, your claim, we can use automation to understand that claim, but then also helps us tell a better story about veterans in your unit, veterans who are in the unit that relieved you, veterans who are in the unit that you relieved. So actually your filing doesn't take from anybody. It actually helps us understand the bigger picture so we can actually then make benefit decisions for everybody. Our ability to make progress in categories 1, 2, and 3, increase trust, make sure people are aware, and then make sure people know that they personally are aware and that they're not taking something from somebody, depends on us getting out to veterans in trusted voices. And this question, I know you're talking a lot about trusted voices today. I've seen that. That is the most important thing. And that's something we dealt with in the White House. It's something we deal with now. But it's also why, going back to your first question, we just think it's so important for us to be transparent. Trust is a hard thing to earn. It's an easy thing to lose. And once it's gone, as I said, it's hard to earn back. So we can't make progress on those 3 places and thus grow the number unless we get that trust, keep it, and grow it.
So we've talked a lot about how many people are applying for benefits, and you just talked about you go in for a screening. So we're seeing increased rates of respiratory issues, breast cancer in men and women, brain cancers, even though those numbers are still tiny.
Yes.
So I go in for a screening, say I've got asthma.
Yeah.
What's next? Beyond the benefits, like when do I start feeling better after,
Well, hopefully, so asthma, so hopefully we can then get you into treatment for the asthma, right? So there's a variety of treatments for the asthma, and I think, hopefully, though, we can get you into treatment that gets you almost immediate relief.
Is that immediate? Is that before the benefits, or do you have to wait till your benefits come through?
No, that you can start getting care. We have a window here early in the PACT Act that you can, as so the initial 5-year window for post-combat deployed veterans is now open. So if you come in, we can get you into care immediately, right? Let me say something else, which is sometimes, at least for me, right, sometimes you don't know precisely what ails you.
Right.
Right? Here's one of the things I stepped through the numbers, who we think qualify, who we know qualify, who's already filed claims. Then we've done working with our actuaries and studying what we know about toxic exposure and what the force has gone through. We've done an assessment of what do we particularly need to hire in the next 10 years. This is something that John Stewart, when he wasn't yelling at me, said to me one time, if I were you, I'd just start getting smart about what people need to get covered, because this is going to pass, he said. And I knew that was right, because I actually worked for the guy who wanted it to be passed and actually signed it, so I knew that. So we did that assessment, and here's what we know, is that what we overwhelmingly need to hire in the next 10 years are mental health professionals. Because, what we know about what we've experienced as a force and what we're experiencing as a country, including through things like the pandemic, is that you may come in to get treated for asthma because you have respiratory issues, but you also might find, hey, it would be great if I could have an opportunity for counseling, right? And so the PACT Act might be the reason you come in, but your whole health, your wellness, hopefully will be the reason you stay. And that's why I'm really excited about the PACT Act, which is it should be the start of a conversation, the renewal of a conversation maybe with veterans who feel that they've had a bad experience with the VA in the past, or the renewal of a conversation with veterans, say, among women veterans who have actually not believed that VA has something for them. So hopefully we can make each of those sales each time we get new vets coming in.
So we'll get back to the PACT Act. Patricia Keim, who's also in the audience, and I keep bringing up their names because they covered the hell out of the burn pits over the years. I don't think we'd be here if they hadn't done that.
Or without you.
Now I've lost my train of thought. No. Patty was writing last week about the training issue, or the hiring issue.
Yes.
And you inherited, I think, something that was kind of difficult. And it sounds like you're going to look at the contract again and see if you should start from scratch.
So this is the EHRM issue.
Right.
Yeah, so this is electronic health record modernization. So for 20 years, VA has been trying to update our electronic health record. I think our clinicians are very proud of the fact that they were the architects and the managers of the first electronic health record in American healthcare. And it's a really cool thing, and it speaks to the agility and the creativity and the thoughtfulness of VA clinicians. But what was a very revolutionary vehicle, electronic health record, is now been so, it's a lot of time has passed, but it's also now been so kind of specialized by VA Medical Center that we don't have a kind of a truly comprehensive one that allow us then to connect into VA, into DOD, such that as a veteran, when you retire, we'd love you to come across the street from DOD and to have the full record of your service available to us so that we can understand what you're going through in terms of health issues or even in terms of claims issues. So in 2018 or 2019, the last administration let a new contract to deploy an updated electronic health record. It's a 10-year contract. It's now deployed into 5 facilities. I was just in one of them yesterday morning in Roseburg, Oregon. And we've had, I think it's fair to say, uneven progress with that system.
That's a word.
Yes. The 10-year contract envisioned a review of the contract at 5 years. We're right now in the middle of that review. I believe really strongly that we need a contract with greater accountability, with greater ability to have legit, heavyweight, experienced trainers working with our legit, heavyweight, experienced healthcare professionals to make sure that we can make this electronic health record work. So we're trying to make sure in the contract review here that we get that out of this
How does
contract.
that bring in, I mean, how do you get DOD to play well with others on that?
Well, you know, we have a big priority here in Chicago, where we have in Lovell, we have a jointly deployed VA and DoD team at a joint facility. That's an example of a place that, you know, it's really important to DoD that we make progress there. We're committing to them to do precisely that. But I think DoD understands that we need a good contract to make it work for us too. Mm-hmm. And it's really important that we be interoperable with DoD. But let's be clear that VA is a customer in and of itself, not derivative of DoD. Mm-hmm. So I think Secretary Austin understands that and respects the need for us to make sure that we have everything we need in this contract. What I'm saying is, right now we don't have that. I'm really eager that we get it, but without it, you know, we're going to have to make some decisions, and we'll see how that proceeds in the next month or so.
We were talking about this last night, how, you know, with the Affordable Care Act, there was skin in the game for the insurers to get their, or the doctors, the medical facilities,
Yeah.
to get the records on board.
Yeah.
And we're thinking about what is the skin in the game for this one?
Yeah.
And it's us, but I'm not sure what the rest of the skin in the game is, so.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. You know, one of the things we assess is end user satisfaction, mm-hmm. meaning how do the clinicians feel about the technology we're trying to deploy. But we've also, as an agency, been really insistent that that can't be the only measurement. It's an important one, but at the end of the day, we have to, you know, and this is where I risk sounding like a management consultant or something, but I'll give it a shot anyway. We have to remember the why here. And I think we've lost that mm-hmm. in the course of the last several years. The why is better health outcomes for veterans. Mm-hmm. Nobody disputes the fact that we need a better electronic health record, a more modern electronic health record to ensure better outcomes for veterans. That's the lifeblood of VA. That's the whole purpose of this multi-year billion-dollar investment, and we have to stay focused on that. So yes, end user satisfaction, the system itself, you know, contributing to the satisfaction of our clinicians, very important. But let's not lose sight of the most important skin in the game, which is our commitment to you, mm-hmm. that you'll have better health outcomes. Mm-hmm. And look, we've got now decades of experience that suggests an electronic health record actually does improve patient outcomes. So we got to get through this period now where we get better trained at it, we get it better deployed. To do that, we need a better contract, and then we'll get better outcomes. But that's the goal, that's the skin in the game, that's the whole reason to do this. Everything else is mood music. What it means for veterans' outcomes is the reason to do it.
Okay, so getting back to the PACT Act.
Yes.
We started working on this in 2008, or reporting on it in 2008.
Yes.
And it seems like it's taken an awfully long time to get to this point, but it's actually really fast. You know, as a Desert Storm vet, you know, Vietnam veterans, any other generation of veteran knows that it takes a long time to get presumptive benefits. And this went through pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why that is? I mean, it wasn't all John Stewart, even though we'll give him a bunch of credit.
Yeah. No, I think the reason it went through is, I've said this in public session before, so I'm going to say it again, because of reporting like yours, that very much crystallized the issue in a very concrete way for members of Congress, and mostly for the voting public, so that there is pressure on members of Congress to do it. So understanding of the issue, which was, I think, more profound in this instance because this period of war really going back to Gulf War I has been so front and center in American lives that we focused on this issue. And that wasn't the case, for example, after Vietnam. I think it was, we wanted, obviously the country was very divided then too. And I think the country wanted to close that chapter. Mm-hmm. So vets had to go fight for themselves. So one is general awareness. Two is veterans being quite insistent, right? And I remember this even when I was in the White House on this issue. Ms. Torres is not somebody one can ignore, even if one tried. So veterans advocated aggressively for themselves. Third, and I think quite consequentially, the president very badly wanted this to happen. I think the president has personal experience in this, but he was also very careful and wanting not to have his personal experience and his belief that Major Biden had developed brain cancer as a result of exposure to burn pits. He did not want that to be understood to be a motivating public factor because he was really focused on the force itself and veterans themselves. But there's no doubt that when the President of the United States stands up in the State of the Union and challenges Congress to do something, that's a powerful tool for presidents. And when he did that in the State of the Union in 2021, I thought that was a gutsy thing for him to do. And had he not done that, I think as powerful as the other two factors were in getting this done, your reporting, the reporting of so many people in the room, the unrelenting advocacy of veterans on their own behalf would not have been enough absent that call to action.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So when we talked the first time, I asked you why in the hell you would take this job. And it feels like
I'm still not sure.
It feels like you've made your job more difficult, which is good in a way for us. But my question is, so you can say that this bill has gone through, but you in the background have been pushing some presumptives through.
Yeah.
How? I mean, that was one of the things that Jon Stewart grilled you about was just like how long it takes to get those presumptives through. So what is it you're doing in the background to be able to handle, to move things up?
Yeah. Well, so it's really interesting. I think Dan's remarks touched on this. Among the things I'm really excited about in the PACT Act is the fact that law now has codified a process that we run internally to establish new presumptives. And, there's a highly substantive question at the heart of whether something's going to be presumptively service-connected, and that is it connected? Is there data? Is there science to show that it's connected? And one of the reasons that we have to be as transparent, that I believe we should be as more transparent is because we have to get people to trust us more. And I think I just had a conversation with Rick out front, a veteran, who does not believe we're transparent about anything. And in fact, we believes that our strategy is just to deny and to delay. Mm-hmm. So in that context, people just think not only are we not legit looking at anything, we're actually ignoring it. So we've set up a process that works with every member of the federal government that has access to data that can help inform a decision about whether some set of toxic exposures and some conditions are connected. So for a long time, we still do work directly with the National Academies of Science, and that's good. They're really smart. They're scientists. That's great. But there's no reason we should limit ourselves to that sole source of intelligence, right? We should go get National Institutes of Health, National Institute of Cancer, OSHA, DOD data. We should get firefighters data. We should get every bit of data that there is and have that inform decisions about new presumptive connections. So in the background, that's what we're doing. We've asked for more money from Congress to grow out our center of excellence based up in East Orange, New Jersey, to look at more science and get access to more science to inform new decisions. But the fact is, at the end of the day, even though we're getting science from more sources, we're investing in more researchers to be able to prosecute more science. Making this connection is not easy. It's just kind of standard, like beakers and, pipettes and all that stuff, that I don't understand. You just need a lot of that, and then you need some time, and you need to dig into it, and you need to prove it. So we're going to execute as against the presumptives that we already established. There were 9 of them, plus the 23 in the Act, and then we're going to keep adding as we can get more and more. Look, we saw recently about what appears to be connection between exposures to pilots and ground crews relating to cancer, right? This is a classic thing that we have to now take and just prosecute and try to make some connections to. Our established processes now, affirmed by the PACT Act, allow us to do that. How quickly can we get that done? I mean, that's the million-dollar question. Not as fast as I want us to, but I keep checking. Now, this raises an interesting question, right? I mean, when you sit in my office, I can keep calling East Orange and say, hey, have you made that presumptive connection yet? And at what time am I, like Dick Cheney, going out to CIA to say, hey, did you find the weapons of mass destruction yet, right? You have to, when you keep asking the question, you're eroding their independence and their integrity, right? So I want to not do that. By the same token, I want to not just let this be on some, as Susan Rice would say, hody-do train. This has got to be on the express, consistent with the fact that we have veterans who are suffering as a result of these exposures. I hope that answers the question. I feel like I'm kind of babbling right now.
No, I mean, it's taken years to get anything through, so to understand a little bit more about why it's moving quickly now. So you said that was the million-dollar question, and I think the other big question is, as a taxpayer, talking about a $15 billion budget, and I mean, the cost of these exposures is going to be a lot.
Yeah.
So if I were a taxpayer, and I am, I'd be pissed. Right. Not only because we've got so many people who, the Army's own regulations said you can't burn trash in an open pit because we know it's bad for the troops. Well, why don't we talk about these things ahead of, do you have ideas about what we could be doing to prevent these kinds of conversations in the future?
I just think this is why I think the first two, of the 3 factors that, led to the passage of the PACT Act, we just have to make sure that we're continuing those 2 first principles, which is reporters scratching at this, digging into this, not relenting on it. Active duty and veterans, continuing to advocate when they see something, to say something. And there's a certain degree of the fact that when you go to war, and you're actually very focused on that moment. And I'm obviously sympathetic to that, as are you, because you did it. And this is why, I thought that kind of the reporting earlier this week, the editorial in the Washington Post, I thought was unfair, in as much as we have to be honest with ourselves about the full cost of war when we go to war.
Right.
And how we, as President Biden calls it, our sacred obligation to those who have fought our wars. He says we have a lot of obligations, but only one sacred obligation, and that's to our vets. We just have to start seeing that as a cost of war. and factoring that in and not expressing surprise all the time when this happens.
Right.
And so how we budget for these things, how we divvy up the federal budget, actually hides in some ways the cost of war. So I think us being candid about it and underscoring why we're doing it will help in that regard. So I don't think I have a silver bullet here, and I guarantee there's going to be another challenge, the next time, as we deal with what when we look back seem so clearly obvious things. But as long as we're continuing to be honest with ourselves about what we're doing, hence the need for reporting, we're honest with ourselves about who's paying the price, namely our troopers, our vets. And then we're also honest about the fact that all of this is not like extra credit. Caring for the people who are exposed to toxins in Iraq is not like a optional exercise. When you swear the oath, we make a very simple commitment. Just you get our back at war, we get your back when you come home. So that's our job to keep that promise. We make it as a country. It's VA's job to keep the promise. So the idea that that's a discretionary question is, or that somehow that's a discretionary expense, I think is wrong.
Okay.
So.
I think we're supposed to open it up for Q&A now.
Okay. Only easy questions, I heard.
I think someone is going to assist us.
Who's somebody here, but I don't know who's going to call the questioners.
Did I go too early or? Okay.
Secretary McDonough, my name is Angel Torres. I'm one of those management consultants, by the way.
How did I sound? Did I sound good?
You were solid, yeah.
Okay,
good. Very, very clean. During your tenure, many of the veterans regard the work you've done, your leadership, as innovation-driven, getting things done, and specifically, with the healthcare, initiatives, the burn pit, and most recently, I learned about the Uber Health initiatives with Dr. Indra Sandal about getting veterans to their health appointments with Uber. Just having a rideshare kind of technology. What are some initiatives that you're most excited about during your time as Secretary of Defense? I'm sorry, Secretary of VA. Excuse me, Secretary of VA. That you're really, really excited about coming down the pipe and sharing with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll tell you one thing I'm really excited about. I just met a Marine veteran on the west side. Works at a really exciting place called Hope Manor. It's one of our big grantees that's helping us beat veteran homelessness. And, grantees like Volunteers of America, Illinois, VOA, Illinois, and then our staff working together is why we're approaching functional zero homeless veterans in Chicago, which I'm really excited about. But this veteran is what we call this Marine veteran is what we call peer support specialist. It's a really innovative, cool program in VA, but it's in many ways not at all innovative, especially for those of us who are familiar with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Basically, a peer support specialist, there's 1,200 of them across the country, all veterans in recovery, who are trained and paid by VA to help other veterans trying to get into recovery. And what do we know about, substance use disorder? Well, we know that a trusting mentor-mentee relationship is really important to making sure that, your daily work on fighting off substance use disorder sticks. But what else do we know? We know that vets helping vets is a very powerful force. We see this force when it's active duty units helping one another. The most powerful force on the face of the planet in its history, right? That same bond that makes the active duty force that powerful is, in these cases of 1,200 individually trained peer support specialists, bringing that same concept unit cohesion, watching out for each other, not leaving you behind, always getting your back, to one of the real challenges we face as a country, which is substance use disorder. And that is a powerful thing. So it's a little cheeky to call that innovation because, and it's not even ours, it's really, Alcoholics Anonymous. But, when you operate at the scale we do, with the resources, to the great good credit of, Republicans and Democrats in Congress and their generous appropriations for us, we can take something like that and really scale it. And I'm really excited about it. So that's a good example of it. So thanks for the question.
Good morning. Thank you both for being here. My name is Megan Posgay, and I'm a program analyst with the VA.
Awesome.
I support Vision 17 remotely,
Excellent.
Which is most of Texas,
Yes.
And I've had the opportunity to work with primary care providers directly, getting them data, information they need, specifically for the toxic exposure screening.
Yes.
Some feedback that I've gotten is just a general concern on sort of time management and clinic management and things of that nature from introducing the toxic exposure screening,
Yes.
particularly in our more rural communities where, as you know, primary care providers tend to be quite busy, high patient load, things of that nature. I think it really highlights just kind of a bigger issue within the VA, and that's just primary care. What does the VA sort of intend to do to ensure that there's enough providers for our veterans? And what are some solutions that might be implemented, whether it's partnering with the community, hiring initiatives, just to make sure that those key primary care providers have the support they need to take care of our veterans?
Yeah, great question. So, and thanks for your partnership, Megan. I'd say a couple things. One, I hear the frustration. And on one level, I want to say, I hear you, we'll work with you, and I'm going to come back to what we're going to work with people on. Another level, I want to say, hey, listen, we've done 2.2 million of these. In 40% of cases, our primary care providers are finding out about an exposure to these toxins. We just heard Dan's speech about what this means, and we're learning about that for the first time. You know what that is? That is a clinically, analytically important event. Meaning, this veteran may be suffering from something that we don't yet know based on that exposure. So it's not like we're asking, when we ask our providers to give the toxic exposure screening, we're not just asking them to check the reflexes, okay? We're asking them to have a conversation with a veteran about something that we know now to be profoundly impactful on their overall wellness. So now to be more understanding of the frustration from our care providers, who are the best in the country. We do need more docs. We need more nurses. We need more frontline workers. We need more psychologists. We're on the verge. We now, every other Friday, we publish a PACT Act dashboard, how we're doing on performance on the PACT Act. So watch out for that. I think the next one is due a week from tomorrow, not tomorrow. That's just meant to be, again, another transparency and confidence building mechanism. We're about to launch a workforce dashboard for the same purpose. We'll track, 9 or 12 specific job categories and how we're doing. We'll publish that data to show. We have goals for this year. We'll show how we're meeting, how we are performing against our ultimate goal. I can tell you this, we're now halfway, since it's April, we're now halfway through the fiscal year. We're well on our way on our targets, but we'll publish those. But let me just tell you about nurses. We've just had the 2 best quarters for hiring of nurses that we've had in 25 years in VA. And those are nurses at all three levels that I'll at least raise today. Registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and nursing assistants. What's interesting is last July was the first month in a couple of fiscal years that we actually added more nurses than we lost. Meaning the trend line over the course of the last couple of years for VA is similar to the trend line of other healthcare system, which is we're actually losing nurses from our healthcare roles. They're going elsewhere, they're joining the nurse traveling corps. That's now changed in the last 6 or 8 months. Why did it change? Well, Congress passed 2 important laws last year. One is the PACT Act, we've talked about that. Has a lot of authorities in there, including pay authorities. And then something called the RAISE Act, which is expressly directed at nurse salaries. So we're using those authorities now. Last thing we have to do a better job of is build more capability in the country. Rather than keep moving nurses around among the healthcare providers, let's get more nurses. And I'm really proud of VA's capabilities there. I was just in Portland on Tuesday, or maybe it's Wednesday, I'm not sure. I don't even know what today is.
Thursday.
So it wasn't yesterday. Tuesday. They're increasing their nurse assistance program where nursing students do all their clinical work in the Portland VA. So what we find is when we do that, those nurses are sticky and stay with VA. But we also know, which is a good thing, but we also know that if there are not clinical training opportunities for our nurse students, we won't get nurses. So this has a win-win effect, which is we're increasing the number of nurses that are in the market, but then we're also making them more likely to choose us when they get a job. So that's an example of what we're doing, and we have to do much, much more of. But 70% of doctors in the United States did at least some of their training at VA, right? It's a remarkable figure. There's no reason that shouldn't grow.
This is a question from our virtual audience. They ask, what more is being done or can be done for dependents that have lost their veteran to toxic exposure?
Excellent question. So we have a specific and concerted effort to make sure that survivors who lost their veteran to toxic exposure have a clear understanding of the benefits that are available to them. And so that survivor specifically should contact us at 1-800-MY-VA-411 or go to va.gov/PACT, and we'll help that survivor make sure that they can file a claim as a survivor. Remember, so the survivor benefits now as a result of the PACT Act include ability over time, of course, to get access to GI Bill benefits, to VRE benefits, and other benefits. So I really encourage the questioner to please contact us and we'll get you filing your claim.
Secretary McDonough, thank you so much for your candor. Great admiration for the work that you're doing. My name is Ryan Pavel. I have the pleasure of serving as the CEO of a nonprofit called the Warrior Scholar Project. Bottom line up front, my question and a bit of context. What can the VA do to help with the unique mental health challenges for folks that get care by virtue of a presumption? So actually the connection here is to the War Horse, where the War Horse published a piece that I wrote called The Presumption of Guilt in January. So I am a Marine Corps veteran. I'm one of the few that was able to get through the system before the PACT Act through a presumption for chronic multi-symptom illness, right? Small fiber neuropathy, GI issues, something I've been dealing with for basically since my service. And one of the things that I realized is that there's something that's unique when your care isn't as clear as other injuries. So if you step on an IED and you're an amputee, you know why you're getting the care.
Yeah.
If you're getting care for something that's toxic exposure, that's out there, right, that you have some sense of what the thing is, it leads to, personally, right, a decade plus worth of just wondering, am I actually eligible for this, right? Is this something that I should be seeking?
Right.
There are some, I think, really unique challenges. And when this War Horse piece, for a while, I thought this might be something which is relatively unique to me, but when that was published, right, the number of people that reached out just to say, like, me too, right? There are so many people that deal with this unique area of really dealing with the mental toll of getting care, getting benefits, getting compensation for something which is that more amorphous exposure. The last thing I'll say on that is I wonder if there's a connection here for the VA's great work recently about expanding mental health services, which quite literally helped save the life of one of my close friends a few weeks ago. So I have great admiration for that initiative. But just something about the primary care screening and just the mental health support that's needed for folks that are going to be going through this presumptive process.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd say three things to this. First, remember why VA started in the first instance, right? We started to do two things: primary care and mental health care. And so, as an organization, I'm not saying we've been perfect on it, but those are the kind of formative offerings for VA, going back to the day. Second, I really hope that any veteran, wherever they are in the process of getting enrolled, for example, any veteran, if you're in crisis, you can reach us, dial 988, press 1, and we'll make sure you're seen that day, right? But that's not expressly your question, but I just want to underscore this again, that you don't have to be enrolled in VA to call the Veteran Crisis Line, right? And under a new piece of law, you also don't have to worry about how it's going to get paid for, right? We'll make sure that we take care of the co-pays and everything. So call 988, press 1 if you're in crisis. Third is, the other thing you can do is you can walk into any of the 350 vet centers we have around the country, which are counseling centers set up in retail settings, overwhelmingly staffed by veterans as the counselors, including combat veterans. They used to call themselves the VA without the hassles because they're a bunch of Vietnam vets who didn't want to go to the big VA, they called it, so they established the vet centers. It's a great vet center right here in Chicago, a couple of them, in fact. So that's the third thing, is you can go right, come see us there. And the last point is, then as you're establishing a relationship with your primary care provider, that's the whole the decisions about what care you get from then on, from once you've established that conversation, is derivative of your relationship with your provider. So please, it's not like in the old days, which is, you're service connected for your knee, you can come in and we'll look at your knee, right? And then you say, well, yeah, but my elbow hurts. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, you got to go somewhere else. That's not the way we work, right? We made a decision in the 90s to say we care about the whole vet, right? And as SecDef says, mental health is your health, all right? And so, let's call that the front door, right? The front door, number one offering, mental health. Have that conversation with the primary care provider. There are other doors in too, right? Terry and I were talking today. You may enter a door at the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs. And you know what? It's not your job to know that you went into the state building when you should have gone in the federal building. It's our job to connect you once you're in, right? But at the end of the day, always, always, always raise with your provider what's on your mind, and then we'll take care of it.
I think we're wrapping it up. One more? Okay.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Graham. I'm one of the students who wrote the white paper for this, and one of the big things we focused on was accountability. This question's really for both of you. As we know, this isn't going to be the last one of these. This isn't going to be the last act. There's PFAS, which I know some journalists here are working on, and there's plenty of other issues. How do kind of both of you think about finding kind of the root cause here? So we can make sure that we aren't making this decision again where we're toxic exposing now and billions of dollars later. How can we ensure that we're finding out where decisions were made to not use incinerators or any of these kind of things so that we can both save a lot of lives and not have to, Veterans Affairs is inherently retrospective.
Yeah.
Like, how do we make that decision better upstream, and who do we hold accountable upstream?
Yeah, this is something I actually feel really passionate about, and I think the War Horse does as well. If voters aren't paying attention, none of this matters, and voters can't pay attention until they have the news they need to understand. It used to be people would get their newspaper in the morning and they'd see a flurry of headlines and they'd at least know what was going on, and now we choose, our own streams of what we're interested in, and veterans and veterans issues and service members sort of fall to the wayside. It's not front of the mind anymore. And I think that any time we go to war, if we are voting, period, if we are voting, it is our duty to pay attention to these issues. You can't just send people into the line of fire and not think about this. It actually makes me really angry. So I think, more reporting, more pushing it up the Congress, more thinking about the money that's going to be spent, just like getting it out there and drilling it hard is I don't know if there's another way to do it. You have to make voters care.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right, and that's why I think it's really important what you're doing today. And it's really important that that War Horse does what it does, that you do what you do for War Horse. This is why we feel really strongly at VA. But the most important person in my life is my wife, and I worked in jobs for a long time. I could never talk to her about the job, right? I don't work in a place like that anymore. There's no secrets at VA. Our business is your business. In fact, your business is our business. So our job is to come out with our hands up on this, and let's make sure that we're accounting for all of this in our, in our national dialogue and our national budgets. And when we do that, then we'll get upstream, right?
Right.
So.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.